Committee on Oversight and Government Reform will come to order. This is a hearing on criminal justice reform and efforts to reduce recidivism. We are pleased to have two of our friends from the other side of the Capitol, and my friend from Virginia has graciously agreed to defer his opening statement so we can hear from you. First, it is my pleasure to introduce first the senator from South Carolina, and then the gentlelady from New Jersey will introduce Senator Booker. Senator Scott was sworn into the U.S. Senate in January 2013 and has been a strong advocate for smart, effective criminal justice reform. He has supported a variety of criminal justice reform legislative initiatives and has launched his Opportunity Agenda, which is a new way forward that includes robust initiatives that give our students and workers a chance to succeed. Senator Scott, on a personal note, I want to thank you for everything you have done in this realm in South Carolina. It is not something we're often asked about back home. It's not criminal justice reform, and for you to take a leadership role on this, to both elevate it to a higher level of public consciousness and then to advocate for it, says a lot about your commitment to it and your character. And with that, you are recognized, and then we will go to Ms. Watson-Coleman for Senator Booker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and to the members of the committee. It is good to be back on the upper side of the chamber. Thank you very much for allowing me to come back. It's good to see old friends that I had the privilege of serving with, particularly my friend Ms. Norton on the Rules Committee. We enjoyed our long hours working through the wonders of committee life in the House. I'd like to also say to Chairman Gowdy, congratulations on your chairmanship, and I am certain that you will make America proud as you search for the truth wherever it may take us. I want to thank Senator Booker, who has been my friend and champion on a number of issues that we have both championed together, from my Opportunity Agenda, from working on ways to reinvest in distressed communities, to criminal justice reform, to apprenticeship programs. He has been a true champion for the people on a number of initiatives that go far beyond my agenda, and it's good to have him here with us today. Criminal justice reform is a critical topic facing our nation as a whole. Today's hearing is focused on recidivism and reentry programs, and I'd like to spend a few minutes on a broader topic first, the topic of incarceration as a whole. What's the best way for us to reduce recidivism? To ensure people from all walks of life and from every single community have access to opportunity. For too many, and specifically communities of color, this is simply not the case. The poverty rate among Blacks and Hispanic Americans is between 2 and 3 times higher than the majority population. Nearly a quarter of the children who live in poverty do not graduate from high school, compared to just 6% of those kids who never lived in poverty. 78% of those in prison do not have post-secondary education. They did not graduate from high school. What does that mean? Well, in 2010, a person who did not graduate from high school had an income of around $19,000. The person who graduated from high school had an income of around $28,000. Graduating from college, $52,000. Black and Hispanic dropout rates are consistently higher. From 1963 to the year 2012, the annual Black unemployment rate for this nation was around 11.6%. To put that in perspective, during all the recessions that happened during those 50 years or so, the average unemployment rate for the entire nation was around 6.7%. Very different patterns. More Black and brown children grow up in poverty. More do not graduate from high school. More earn less, and more are oftentimes employed less. As you, Chairman, and so many others have heard my story, as a kid growing up in a single-parent household who flunked out of high school as a freshman, I understand intimately and personally what these statistics translate to in the real world. It translates into a pipeline that too often leads to incarceration, a pipeline that too often leads to low expectation of oneself, and a pipeline that too often reinforces the negative stereotypes that are pervasive in our society. And the impact that it has on the human condition is tremendous, and it is consistently negative. I believe that those are some of the reasons why black men like myself, are incarcerated at a rate 6 times higher than men that look like you. This is an epidemic that we have to wrestle with as a nation, as one American family working together to find solutions that work for everyone in every place, no matter where they started. The concept of opportunity as a solution for incarceration is something that is real, it is measurable, and it is something that I've lived, thankfully, through. While we must find ways to promote and lower recidivism rates, I want us to continue to focus on opportunity, improving our education system, encouraging entrepreneurs and small business owners to grow and invest in low-income communities. This can solve a lot of problems and specifically prevent the conversation of recidivism. I've had an opportunity to sit down with quite a few organizations to talk about reducing recidivism. I visited a few state prisons in South Carolina with Brian Sterling, who I'm happy to see, the director of our Corrections Institute, will be on the next panel. One such program I visited is called Turning Leaf, located in Charleston, South Carolina, run by Amy Bach. She has a recidivism rate of 18%, when our national average is closer to 70%. And she deals with only the most difficult inmates. Another program is called Proverbs 22:6, which works throughout both South Carolina and North Carolina to help reconnect inmates with their families. My chief of staff and I visited both Kershaw and Lee County Correctional Facilities with Proverbs 2:26 founder Cyril Prabhu. And what we experienced that day was the reconnection of inmates with their children, with a program that transforms the life of the inmate and gives him a reason to believe that the future can be different. To watch the reunification of family after we served them lunch and spent a couple of hours talking with them was one of the most moving experiences I've had in my life. And I understood why the success of the recidivism program, Proverbs 2:26, has been so powerful in the lives of these inmates. Here's a statistic that we should pay attention to, and this is why Proverbs 2:26 is so important. 82% probability for a child whose parent is in prison to end up in prison. Let me say that one more time. If a child has a parent in prison today, there is an 82% probability that that child will end up in prison. Working to reconnect families is one of the ways that we can reduce recidivism. What is the recidivism rate for the Proverbs 2:26 program? 6%. 6%. Since 2012, the number of children in the program have gone from 800% to 5,000 children whose parents are incarcerated in 10 different prisons. I was in California last weekend meeting with programs in California, the Bridge Academy, that basically fills the gap. So they don't replicate any existing programs. They simply connect not the inmate, but the entire family to the programs and resources that are already available. They make them aware of them. They make sure that they attend, and then through an 18-month process, their recidivism rate is 0. There are ways for us to improve public safety, reduce recidivism, and restore families and the American dream for people who had lost hope. I look forward to the national debate that must continue on this very important topic. I know I'm running out of time. As you know, that we in the Senate can't necessarily tell 5 minutes of time. We anticipate that you give us a 10 minutes or an hour. That might be too long. Let me just say that your commitment, Mr. Chairman, the committee's willingness to hear the testimonies, ask questions, is a very important part of what we can do to help restore the American dream for so many people in so many dark places that have lost hope. I want to thank you again for holding this important hearing. My door will remain open to work with anyone from anywhere at any time to address this very important issue. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Scott. The chair will now recognize Ms. Watson Coleman from New Jersey to introduce our friend, Senator Booker.
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations on your appointment. I look forward to working with you in a bipartisan way on issues such as important as this. Welcome, Senator Scott. It's good to see you, and it is my pleasure today to introduce my friend and fellow New Jerseyan, Senator Cory Booker. Senator Booker was elected to the United States Senate in 2013, and since then has established himself as an ally for what's right. As an innovative and bipartisan problem solver, Senator Booker is committed to developing collaborative solutions that address some of our most complex challenges. He has fought for New Jersey resources, whether it's for Superstorm Sandy victims, transportation system, or just to keep our communities safe. He has been actively engaged in the pursuit of justice and opportunity for our citizens, particularly those who have been incarcerated and for whom we expect a second chance. As a member of the state legislature, I worked with then Mayor Cory Booker on many initiatives around criminal justice reform and second chance opportunities, and I have witnessed his steadfast commitment to those issues here in the Senate. So it is a proud day for me to be able to recognize him, to welcome him to OGR, and to give him this opportunity to share his thoughts and his vision to this end. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Senator Booker.
Mr. Chairman, please know that this is a moment for me that I could not have dreamed of, that Bonnie Watson Coleman and I, when we were just local politicians, never imagined that she and I would be in the Capitol together, serving as congresspeople together, and it is an honor to have that privilege, and I thank you for affording me that. Mr. Gowdy, I just want to put it out there right away. You have been a gentleman, somebody of honor in working with me on these issues. I've come to have a deep respect for you, and you're somebody who I now have on speed dial and have just been grateful for your interest in this issue and your willingness to work so hard on it. Please allow me a moment just to say my prayers are with Elijah Cummings. He is recovering, I know. There is no physical ailment that is tougher than he is, and I look forward to seeing him back in the chair. But Mr. Connolly, I'm grateful that you are standing in his place. I want this committee to know about my personal experiences. I grew up in an incredibly nice town in northern New Jersey suburbs as a result of blacks and whites, Republicans and Democrats, who actually came together and fought for my family to be the first black family to move into town. We had to get a sting operation and have two white people pose as my parents after they were told the house was sold to actually get the house. On the day of the closing, the white couple didn't show up. My father did, and a volunteer lawyer named Marty Friedman, the real estate agent, attacked my father's lawyer, sicked a dog on my dad. After a whole bunch of legal rigmarole, we were able to get access to this town and become, as my father affectionately called us, the four raisins in a tub of sweet vanilla ice cream. I grew up in this town, a town of affluence, this town of incredible opportunity, incredible public schools till I was 18 years old. went off to Stanford University, Oxford University, Yale University, to the point where my father's frustration told me, boy, you got more degrees in the month of July, but you ain't hot. You got to do something for your country. And I made a decision at that point to move, really following the calling of a great American prophet. Some of you might have studied him in graduate school, named Chris Rock. And I moved onto the south end of Martin Luther King Boulevard. Chris Rock says, why is it often the most violent streets in many cities? It's named for the man that stood for nonviolence. Martin Luther King Boulevard in Newark actually is a great testimony to King. Even in the 1990s when I first moved there, with some of the greatest educational institutions New Jersey has, but the south end of that street was in a very difficult shape. It's been 20-plus years. I still live in that neighborhood. I've got 99 colleagues. Sounds like the beginning of a rap song, but I've got 99 colleagues. And I'll tell you this, I might be the only one that lives in a community that's below the poverty line. Median income is $14,000 per household. It's a black, mostly black, majority black and Latino inner city. And I sit here with passion to the folks before me to let you know that I have witnessed this country's failure to live up to its promise that's written on the Supreme Court wall that says equal justice under law. I have seen with my own eyes, experienced my own friends. There is no difference in America between blacks and whites, in Latinos and Asians in drug use. No difference whatsoever. When I was at Stanford's campus, there was a whole lot of drug use going on. But the drug laws in this country are enforced disproportionately against people of color. If you're black in America, you're almost 4 times more likely to be arrested for using marijuana, for using more serious drugs, or for dealing it. And I say this in the beginning of my remarks to make this understanding that there is something seriously wrong in this country, that we have gone so far off the rails that we have defined ourselves as the greatest civilization in all of humanity for locking up its own people, disproportionately for nonviolent drug crimes, often for crimes that 2 of the last 3 presidents admitted to doing. Remember, they didn't talk about just some marijuana usage. It was felony drug use and drug possession. And what hurts me is that while we as a nation were disinvesting in our infrastructure, remember, we inherited from our grandparents the greatest infrastructure on the planet Earth. The World Economic Forum, in my daddy's age, ranked the infrastructure of the United States the #1 in the country. Now the World Economic Forum ranks us out of the top 10. But there's one area, and I've traveled around the globe like many of you have, there's one area that even other countries, leaders in other countries, stopped and asked me about, that we have built out infrastructure in that puts the rest of the world to shame. Between the time I was in law school and the time I became mayor of Newark, New Jersey, we in this country were building a new prison every 10 days. Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars incentivized by us here in the federal government to build out the largest prison industrial complex on the planet Earth and to imprison more people within our country than humanity has ever seen. 4% of the globe's population, 1 out of every 5 imprisoned people on the planet Earth. And the people we imprison is stunning. We take the most vulnerable people in our populations, not the privileged who grew up in places like my hometown, or the people that go to Stanford or Oxford and Yale, who use drugs at the same rates, but we imprison the most vulnerable. Overwhelmingly, we imprison the poor. Overwhelmingly, we imprison the mentally ill. Overwhelmingly, we prison the addicted. Overwhelmingly, or disproportionately, excuse me, we imprison people of color. And it was startling for me, jarring for me, having lived 20 years in places of privilege and 20 years in my phenomenal city, to see how the criminal justice system is tearing apart communities, enforcing poverty. There's a college study that came out, university study that came out, that said the United States of America would have 20% less poverty, 20% less poverty today if we had incarceration rates just like our industrial peers. In fact, we know why. The American Bar Association points it out. Because that 17-year-old kid caught in Newark, New Jersey for doing things that maybe a third of Congress has done, who pleads to a felony account. And by the way, Our criminal justice system is no longer, and you know this, Mr. Chairman, is no longer juries, it's no longer judges. 98% of our criminal convictions are now done by plea bargain. And so a kid who's now facing mandatory minimums stacked on top of each other versus taking a plea and getting right out of jail, now that 17-year-old faces, according to the American Bar Association, 40,000 collateral consequences. Can't get a Pell Grant, can't get a business license, can't get a job, can't get food stamps, can't get public housing. In many places, can't vote. And so we have a system now that is so broken that it has nothing to do with the ideals we hail of liberty and justice. And that's what frustrates me, because now I found partnerships with people all across the political spectrum who understand that this is an American shame. I never thought when I came to Washington that the Koch brothers' general counsel would become a dear friend of mine, Mark Holden, because of our partnership on these issues. That Newt Gingrich, Grover Norquist, Christian evangelical leaders across the country, libertarians, fiscal conservatives, even the other bald black guy in the Senate, Tim Scott. We are united in this cause to see that this is one of the great shames in our country. And it is crushing communities like the one in which I live, like the one in which the Congresswoman is from. And if there is injustice, Langston Hughes called, what happens to a dream deferred? What happens when certain communities don't benefit from the liberties and the ideals of this country, at ways that they themselves begin to lose faith in the promise of America? I will tell you this. I was in yet another federal lockup, and it was a women's prison in Connecticut just last month. And I walked in and I asked the warden, this strong, great leader, I asked her, what percentage of the women in this prison have been victims of sexual trauma, of sexual assault, of violence? And this warden turns to me and says, about 95% of the women are victims of sexual assault. I visited a federal prison in New Jersey, and I asked the warden there, how many folks here have been here too long, are no threat to our society, are taxpayers wasting their dollars on? And he just started laughing, and he said, Corey, too many to count. You see, we've lost our way. It's not like we're looking for justice, restorative justice. It's not like we're looking for the ideals of this country. Our criminal justice system is built up for retribution. And the beauty of this moment in American history is that there are enough examples, you heard them from Senator Scott, that show us a different way. We see state after state demonstrating the truth. We can actually make our states safer. Public safety should be number one. There are ways to make our states safer, save taxpayer dollars, elevate human potential, take care of the weak, and drive what we should be driving toward in this society is where we give our children more solid ground amidst which to thrive. And so in the United States Senate, I'm proud that we cobbled together a bill. Chuck Grassley and Dick Durbin together on a bill. Mike Lee, Ted Cruz, and myself and Senator Whitehouse together on a bill. And what worries me is that my colleague, a man whose character I have never maligned, a man who, Jeff Sessions, who served with dignity, a man who I stood with and gave medals with to the marchers on the Edmund Pettus Bridge. But on this issue, he is so wrong. He wrote recently that we should turn back the reforms we were starting to make in the Justice Department, and that we should go back to punitive sentencing, the most harsh possible. Well, that will cost taxpayer money. That will not be a pursuit of justice. It may be law and order, but everyone here who loves and savors democracy has seen enough totalitarian states establish law and order but lack justice. And so I call upon this committee, my brothers and sisters, who savor liberty as much as I do, who love this country and her ideals as much, if not more, than I do. Let's not let this dream be deferred in our country any longer. I want to tell you right now that there is the Sentencing Reform and Corrections Act, but there's other things as well. I had my first ever bipartisan, bicameral bill done with this committee. Elijah Cummings and Darrell Issa joined me and Ron Johnson in the Senate on just a simple step. We introduced the Bipartisan Fair Chance Act, a bill that would make a dramatic difference in just someone coming out of prison getting a job. We call them ban-the-box bills that have been done all across the nation, so-called red states, so-called blue states. In fact, Walmart, Home Depot, Starbucks have all done this, but the biggest employer in our country, which is the federal government, and its contractors, hasn't done that. This is about making sure that it's striking the right balance. It's a bill that allows returning citizens to get their foot in the door and be fairly considered for jobs while allowing employers to know who they are hiring. There are so many brilliant ideas out there. Senator Scott pointed them out. We did them in shoelaces and bubble gum in Newark, where we show that we can drive recidivism down, elevate human life, bring the wardens in from our federal penitentiaries. The ones I've gone around this country and talked to all know what we're doing terribly wrong, all know common sense things that we can do to make it right. And so I encourage this committee. The worst type of privilege in America, the most insidious type of privilege, is to know that there is a serious problem out there that is tearing apart communities, that is hurting Americans. The most insidious type of privilege is knowing that there's a serious cause out there, but it doesn't affect me or my family, and therefore it's not that important or urgent. The biggest cancer on the soul of our country right now is the American criminal justice system. And we can make it right. I want to end again with Langston Hughes. He said very simply that there is a dream in this land with its back against the wall. To save the dream for one, we must save the dream for all. I don't know what Leader McConnell's plans are this week, but I'll probably be going back to Newark on Thursday evening. On my block, there are incredible kids with the same amount of genius and potential, in fact, more so than I had growing up in a very different community. It is hurtful that I know the percentages for those children. You're black born in America today, you have a 1 in 3 chance of going to prison. That is a stunning statistic. And even worse than that, if you're a black kid in America, you heard the data, your chances of having an adult in prison, a parent in prison, is dramatic. In fact, for all kids, it's 1 in 28 of our children right now having a parent that's served in prison. This is not the America for which we dream. This is the dream with its back against the wall. We can do something about this. We must do something about this. And I know my colleagues with a sense of urgency and patriotism, and dear God, with a sense of love. I know this Congress in this bipartisan way that we, the people, can change our country and make, as my dear brother says in Bible study, we can make justice roll down like water and righteousness like a mighty stream. Thank you.
On behalf of all of us, we want to thank Senator Scott and Senator Booker, not just for your public passion, but also for your private commitment that has demonstrated itself over the course of the last several years. So thank you. We will stand in recess.
Mr. Chairman,
yes, ma'am.
Point of personal privilege. I would like something to be entered into the record. I want to thank both senators for coming. Senator Tim Scott never spoke of an incident or incidents that are relevant to this hearing, because that's typical of him, not to speak of something that is relevant, that relates to him, even though it relates to everyone else. And I'm going to ask, be put into the record, an article from CNN.com. Black senator describes facing unfair scrutiny by police, where Senator Tim Scott did something that he said was the most difficult when he gave a speech, because it was the most personal. He described how he had been stopped 7 times by law enforcement here, I believe, in the district. But on Capitol Hill, it was my friend who brought this article, my friend, Mr. Clay, who brought this to my attention. He said, but the vast majority of the time, I was pulled over for nothing more than driving a new car in the wrong neighborhood or some other reason just as trivial. Mr. Scott has been pulled over for stealing the car or accused of stealing the car he was driving in. He described the plight of a former staffer who sold his, quote, nice car because he was so tired of being targeted by suspicious police. In the same speech on the Senate floor, Senator Scott praised the police for the dangerous lives they lived and complimented him on the work they do. That is the kind of man Senator Tim Scott is, and I thought that, and I asked that that be put into the record.
Without objection, and obviously I agree with everything you said, Ms. Holmes Norton. I think he's planning on including that in his memoir, and so he was hoping that you would buy the book and read those stories as opposed to doing it in a newspaper article.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
I just want to thank our 2 witnesses. I have not heard more eloquent statements, and they're bipartisan, about our criminal justice system and its many failures and the consequences in human lives and the scar in our country. And I want to thank you both, because I think it was a great way to begin this hearing. Thank you.
I thank the gentleman from Virginia. They called votes. Thank both of you. We'll be in recess subject to the call of the chair.